In the bustling outskirts of a sprawling city, the Marwood Heights apartment complex stood as a monument to urban decay. Once a vibrant community, the complex had fallen into disrepair, its darkened windows and graffiti-strewn walls a stark contrast to the lively streets around it. The city folk whispered about Marwood Heights, spinning tales of mysterious disappearances and eerie happenings that seemed to hover like a dense fog over the dilapidated buildings. The story begins with Elise, a young freelance writer in desperate need of affordable housing. Driven by necessity rather than choice, Elise moved into apartment 304 of Marwood Heights, drawn by the surprisingly low rent and its proximity to the city's creative hub. The apartment, though shabby and worn, held an inexplicable charm with its high ceilings and a large, shadowy balcony that overlooked the inner courtyard of the complex. From the moment she moved in, Elise felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her. The walls seemed to whisper at night, voices just low enough to elude understanding. She brushed off these experiences as products of her overactive imagination, fueled by the creepy stories she had heard about Marwood Heights. As days turned into weeks, Elise befriended some of the other tenants, Jonah, an elderly man with an encyclopedic knowledge of the building's history, Maya, a reclusive artist who claimed she could communicate with the spirits dwelling in the complex, and Alex, a skeptical college student who laughed off the supernatural stories as urban legends. One night, driven by a blend of curiosity and an upcoming deadline for a horror story, Elise gathered her new friends in her apartment to share tales of what they had experienced. Jonah spoke of the complex's past, a site once used as an asylum during the early 1900s, which was later converted into apartment buildings after a devastating fire claimed the lives of many inmates. Maya shared her eerie paintings, which depicted shadowy figures lurking in the complex's hallways, figures she claimed to have seen with her own eyes. Inspired and somewhat disturbed by these stories, Elise decided to delve deeper into the history of Marwood Heights, visiting the local library to dig through old newspaper archives. There, she discovered a series of articles detailing the mysterious circumstances surrounding the fire, and subsequent reports of disappearances and strange occurrences that began shortly after the buildings were reconstructed. Meanwhile, strange things continued to happen back at Marwood Heights. Residents reported hearing sobbing through the walls at night, sightings of ghostly apparitions in the corridors, and an oppressive feeling of dread that seemed to grow with each passing night. Elise, Jonah, Maya, and Alex, driven by a mix of fear and fascination, formed an unofficial pact to uncover the truth behind the hauntings of Marwood Heights. Their investigation led them to the basement of the complex, a place few had ventured since the conversion. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors beneath the building, the air grew colder, and the faint whispering Elise had heard in her apartment became a chorus of desperate, anguished voices. The group stumbled upon a hidden room sealed off behind a crumbling wall. Inside, they found remnants of what looked like an old psychiatric ward, rusty bed frames, shackles bolted to the walls, and faded, peeling murals depicting eerily serene landscapes. In the center of the room lay a large, old book, its cover charred but its pages miraculously preserved. The book appeared to be a log or journal, detailing the patients' names and the inhumane treatments they had endured. As Elise flipped through the pages, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing their flashlights and plunging them into darkness. Panic set in as they heard the walls around them begin to moan and the floor beneath them tremble. They managed to escape the basement, but the haunting did not stop there. Back in her apartment, Elise felt a chilling certainty that something had followed them from the depths. Her dreams were plagued by visions of the fire, the screams of the trapped and forgotten, and a shadowy figure that beckoned her back to the basement. The group realized that they had disturbed something malevolent, something that perhaps should have never been disturbed. As the hauntings intensified, each member of the group started experiencing personal nightmares manifesting in their waking lives. Maya painted frenzied scenes of the fire as if driven by an unseen force, her hands moving against her will. Jonah's knowledge turned into obsession as he barricaded himself in his apartment, poring over old texts and muttering about a way to close the gateway. Alex, once skeptical, was now tormented by unexplainable physical ailments that doctors could not diagnose. Elise, determined not to succumb to the horrors of Marwood Heights, decided to confront the shadowy figure from her dreams. Armed with the old asylum log as a guide, she planned to venture once more into the basement, believing that understanding the past might help them confront and possibly quell the restless spirits. The night before they planned to return to the basement, Elise dreamed of a young woman named Sarah, one of the asylum's former patients whose tragic story was detailed in the log. In the dream, Sarah led Elise through the charred remains of the old asylum, her voice a whisper barely audible over the crackling flames. She spoke of a hidden vault beneath the basement, where the darkest experiments had been conducted and where her body had been unceremoniously left to decay. With each step, the air grew hotter, and the screams of the invisible damned rose around them. Sarah's presence, though ghostly, felt like a beacon of sorrow and rage, guiding Elise towards a horrifying truth hidden in the depths of Marwood Heights. The next day, Elise shared her vision with the group. They gathered their courage, along with tools to break through any physical barriers they might encounter. The basement was even colder than before, the air thick with a sense of impending dread. The whispers were now clear, desperate voices begging for release or screaming for vengeance. The group moved through the darkness, their flashlights casting long, ominous shadows against the damp walls. They found the sealed vault Sarah had shown Elise in the dream. It took hours to break through the old, rusted locks and reinforced door. Inside, they discovered a smaller, more secure chamber, its walls lined with ancient, dust-covered files and dark stains that spoke of unspeakable acts. At the center of the room was a pit, a shallow grave where numerous skeletons lay intertwined, their bones marked with signs of severe trauma. The air in the vault was suffocating, heavy with the despair of souls long trapped within its confines. As they documented their findings, hoping to bring some form of justice to those lost, the temperature dropped sharply. Their breath became visible, and the lights flickered as if the energy in the room was being drained. The shadows seemed to move independently, swirling around the room, tightening around them like a noose. Jonah, his voice trembling, recited passages from an old text he believed could contain the restless spirits. Maya, her eyes wide with terror, sketched the scene, her drawings becoming more frantic as the shadows grew darker. Alex, once a disbeliever, clutched a crucifix, the skepticism washed away by undeniable fear. Elise, feeling a strange pull towards the pit, approached it as if drawn by an unseen hand. She could hear Sarah's voice, now a pained echo, urging her to look deeper. As she peered into the abyss, the bones seemed to stir, a low moan emanating from the earth itself. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and a cold gust rushed up from the pit, enveloping her in a chilling embrace. The group felt a presence then, more potent and terrifying than any ghostly apparition. It was an ancient, vengeful force, unleashed by their intrusion, and now free to roam the halls of Marwood Heights. The lights died completely, plunging them into darkness as the voices crescendoed into a deafening roar. In the pitch black, they fled, guided by the faint, flickering light from Jonah's failing flashlight. The building seemed to come alive around them, walls cracking, floors heaving, and the air filled with the sound of something vast and angry stirring in the depths. They barely made it out of the basement, the door slamming shut with a force that echoed like a gunshot. Back in their respective apartments, each member of the group was left to grapple with what they had experienced. The building was no longer just a place of eerie stories and minor spectral occurrences. It had become a gateway to something profoundly dark and powerful. The residents of Marwood Heights, once oblivious or mildly amused by the tales, now found themselves living in a palpable state of fear. The hauntings became more aggressive, physical manifestations occurring with terrifying regularity, and the building itself seemed to deteriorate at an accelerated pace. Elise, her resolve hardened by the horrors she had witnessed, knew that this was only the beginning. They had stirred something that could not be easily quelled or contained. As she lay in bed that night, the whispering shadows creeping along the edges of her room, she realized that the true battle for Marwood Heights was just beginning. The secrets of the asylum, the tortured souls of its forgotten patients, and the dark force they had unleashed were now intricately woven into the fabric of the building, each shadow filled with a story, each whisper a warning. The story of Marwood Heights was far from over, and its darkest chapters were yet to be written. As the hauntings of Marwood Heights escalated, the bonds among Elise, Jonah, Maya, and Alex grew stronger, bound together by the terror they had witnessed and the unresolved mysteries that lingered in the air like the stale smell of decay. Each night brought new horrors, inexplicable noises that echoed through the hallways, doors slamming shut without reason, and chilling glimpses of ghostly figures that vanished when approached. Elise, her nights plagued by restless sleep and disturbing visions, began to document everything. Her apartment turned into a makeshift command center, walls plastered with historical records, photographs of the asylum, and Maya's eerie artwork. Among the chaos of her research, one pattern emerged. Sarah's story was central to the haunting. Her spirit, tortured and unavenged, seemed to be the catalyst for the malevolence that had overtaken the building. Determined to find closure for Sarah and peace for Marwood Heights, Elise proposed a daring plan. They would hold a séance in the basement, at the heart of the old asylum, to attempt communication with Sarah's spirit directly. Perhaps by understanding her pain and helping her find peace, they might also calm the other restless spirits. The night of the séance arrived, laden with a heavy, suffocating atmosphere. The four gathered in the basement, their faces illuminated by the dim glow of candles placed in a circle around them. Jonah, who had brought an old tome of rituals he claimed could protect them, painted symbols around the perimeter with salt and ash. Maya set up her canvases, ready to capture whatever visions might come. Alex, though still harboring doubts, held onto his crucifix, a silent prayer on his lips. As the clock struck midnight, Elise began the séance, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "Sarah, we call upon you," she intoned, "reveal yourself to us and share your story. We seek to understand and to help." The candles flickered as if caught in a sudden breeze, and the temperature dropped sharply. A palpable presence filled the room, the air thick with anticipation and fear. Then, a figure slowly materialized in the center of their circle, Sarah, her form spectral but distinctly pained, her eyes hollow with decades of suffering. Sarah's voice, when she spoke, was a mere whisper, yet it bore the weight of unbearable agony. "Free us," she pleaded, "end our torment." She recounted the horrors she had endured, the experiments that had twisted and broken her both physically and mentally, and her death, lonely and unmourned in the dark confines of the basement. The room shook as she spoke, walls groaning under the strain of her sorrow. Maya's brushes moved furiously, guided by an unseen force, capturing Sarah's visage and the emotional storms surrounding her. Jonah recited incantations, his voice rising over Sarah's whispers, seeking to strengthen the protective barrier he had created. Elise, driven by a mix of fear and compassion, reached out her hand towards Sarah, an offer of solace. As she did, a sudden surge of energy swept through the basement. The candles snuffed out, plunging them into darkness, and a scream echoed through the complex, a cacophony of every soul lost to the asylum's cruelty. When the lights returned, Sarah's spirit had vanished, but the air felt lighter, as if a part of the darkness had lifted. However, the peace was short-lived. The building itself began to react, walls cracking and floors shifting as if the structure was coming alive. The group barely escaped the basement as the door slammed shut with an ominous finality, the echo of Sarah's last word, "Free us," lingering in their ears. Back in her apartment, Elise felt a deep unrest stirring within her. The séance had provided some answers, but had also unleashed new forces. She realized that Sarah's spirit was not the only one trapped in Marwood Heights. The asylum had been a place of profound suffering for many, and their spirits were intertwined with the building's very essence. As the days passed, the hauntings grew more intense. Residents began to leave, driven away by the relentless supernatural disturbances. But Elise, Jonah, Maya, and Alex could not leave. They felt a responsibility to those trapped spirits, a need to restore peace not just to the building but to the souls intertwined with it. The group delved deeper into the history of the asylum, uncovering names and stories of other patients who had suffered within its walls. Each name added to their understanding and also to their burden. The hauntings became more personal, each spirit seeking acknowledgement and release. As they prepared for what they knew would be a long and arduous journey, Elise recorded every detail, her blog now a diary of the haunting of Marwood Heights. Each post ended with a call to those who might help, to those who had experienced similar hauntings, to come forward. The story of Marwood Heights was far from over. It was just the beginning of a deeper, darker exploration into the supernatural forces at play. In the ensuing weeks, Elise and her friends faced increasing challenges. The building seemed to have a mind of its own, with doors that would lock and unlock mysteriously, elevators operating independently, and windows that would shatter without any impact. The electricity would flicker erratically, casting the hallways into darkness without warning, only to reveal fleeting glimpses of apparitions standing in the shadows when the lights returned. As the situation escalated, the group's efforts became more desperate. They sought out experts in paranormal activity, historians knowledgeable about the building's grim past, and even psychics who might communicate further with the spirits. Each visitor brought new insights, but also new dangers, as if their attempts to communicate were provoking the spirits to greater displays of power. One night, while researching in the public library, Elise found a forgotten manuscript buried in the archives. It was the personal diary of Dr. Aldous Hargrave, the head of the asylum during its darkest years. The diary revealed chilling details about the experiments conducted on the patients, driven by Hargrave's belief in supernatural capabilities of the human mind. His notes suggested that he was attempting to create a conduit between the living and the dead, using the patients as unwilling participants in his horrific trials. The diary also hinted at the existence of a hidden chamber within the asylum where Hargrave carried out his most secret experiments. This room, according to the diary, contained an artifact of unknown origin, described only as the key to the veil. Hargrave believed this artifact was essential to his work, a tool to permanently open a gateway to the spirit world. Armed with this new information, the group decided to search for the hidden chamber. They scoured the basement, now familiar with its chilling atmosphere, and after several tense days of searching, they discovered a concealed door behind an old filing cabinet in Hargrave's abandoned office. The hidden chamber was a small, claustrophobic room with walls lined with archaic symbols. At its center stood a pedestal holding an ancient, metallic object adorned with intricate engravings and faintly glowing symbols. The air around it shimmered with a spectral light, and the temperature dropped noticeably as they approached. As soon as Elise touched the artifact, a surge of visions overwhelmed her. She saw the asylum in its early days, the patients suffering under Hargrave's cruel experiments, and the spirit's anguished entrapment within the walls of Marwood Heights. She also saw Hargrave himself, his descent into madness as he became consumed by his quest to breach the boundaries of life and death. The group realized that the artifact was the source of the hauntings, the anchor keeping the spirits bound to the physical world. They debated what to do with it: destroy it, remove it from the building, or use it to attempt to free the spirits. Each option carried significant risks, and they feared that the wrong choice could exacerbate the hauntings or even unleash something far worse. Meanwhile, the disturbances in Marwood Heights reached a new intensity. Objects flew through the air with violent force, injuring residents and scaring away most of the remaining tenants. The building's infrastructure began to deteriorate rapidly, with water pipes bursting and electrical fires breaking out spontaneously. It became clear that whatever they were going to do, they needed to act quickly. As they prepared to make a decision about the artifact, Elise's blog attracted the attention of a mysterious figure, a descendant of one of the original architects of the asylum. This person claimed to have knowledge of the building's esoteric design and its purpose as a psychic prison designed to contain the spirits harnessed by Hargrave's experiments. With this new ally, Elise and her friends planned a final confrontation with the forces within Marwood Heights. They would use the artifact in a ritual designed to either seal away the spirits forever or release them from their torment. As they gathered in the hidden chamber, setting up their equipment and preparing their minds for the ordeal ahead, they were unaware of the true magnitude of the forces they were about to confront. The ritual began at midnight, under a blood-red moon, the air crackling with electric tension. As they activated the artifact, the building shook violently, as if an earthquake had struck its very foundations. The walls of the chamber vibrated with an eerie hum, and the symbols began to glow with a fierce, otherworldly light. Outside, the night sky turned a deep, ominous shade of crimson, and the ground beneath Marwood Heights tremored with growing intensity. Inside, the spirits swirled around them, their faces twisted in expressions of both hope and despair, caught in the flux between this world and the next. The power unleashed was more terrifying and beautiful than anything they could have imagined, a whirlwind of souls and memories colliding with the physical reality of Marwood Heights. The building itself seemed to breathe, walls expanding and contracting like the chest of a gigantic beast. The air was thick with a chorus of whispers, each voice a thread in the tapestry of the asylum's dark history. As the ritual intensified, the group found themselves standing at the threshold between life and death, reality blurring around them. The artifact, now fully activated, pulsed with a life of its own, its glow illuminating the chamber in stark, surreal light. The symbols on the walls seemed to move, twisting and turning in a dance of ancient power. Elise, her mind linked to the artifact through a cascade of visions, witnessed the myriad lives that had been twisted and broken within the asylum's walls. She saw the spirits not as mere echoes of suffering, but as individuals with hopes, dreams, and fears, all extinguished by Hargrave's merciless pursuit of knowledge. She felt their pain, their longing for release, and their rage against the man who had doomed them to eternal unrest. The physical strain on the group was immense. Jonah, chanting incantations to bolster their defense, struggled to maintain the barrier as malevolent forces pounded against their protections like waves against a cliff. Maya, her eyes wide with fear and awe, continued to sketch frantically, her drawings becoming more abstract and chaotic, as if trying to capture the essence of the supernatural storms surrounding them. Alex, despite his initial skepticism, became a pillar of strength for the group, his faith providing a beacon of hope amidst the darkness. He supported Elise, whose connection to the artifact seemed to be draining her life force, her face pale and her body trembling. The chamber's atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive, the air so heavy it was hard to breathe. The walls began to bleed, a slow drip of black, viscous fluid that pooled on the floor and reflected the flickering light in unsettling patterns. The voices grew louder, a cacophony of anger, pleading, and sorrow that filled the room with a tangible sense of despair. Amidst this chaos, the mysterious figure who had contacted Elise through her blog revealed themselves as Cassandra, the great-granddaughter of one of the asylum's original architects. She brought with her ancient documents and blueprints that contained hidden symbols and phrases which could strengthen the ritual. With her knowledge, they adjusted their approach, redirecting the energy of the artifact to not just release the spirits but also to repair the psychic wounds left in the fabric of the building. As they adjusted the ritual, the building itself reacted violently. The ground shook, cracks spreading across the floor and climbing up the walls like creeping vines. From these fissures, a bluish light emanated, a visual manifestation of the psychic energy trapped within the building. The spirits, sensing the shift in energy, began to converge on the chamber. They formed a spectral vortex above the artifact, their forms blurring and merging into a swirling maelstrom of light and shadow. The group stood hand in hand, united in their purpose, as they channeled their combined energies into the ritual. Elise, acting as the conduit, felt an overwhelming rush of emotions and memories flood through her. She saw the asylum through the eyes of its inmates, felt their confusion and fear, their pain, and ultimately their burning desire for peace. She spoke to them, her voice echoing in the chamber, promising release and rest. As the ritual reached its climax, the artifact emitted a blinding light, and a shockwave of energy rippled through Marwood Heights. The building groaned, a sound like the lament of a dying giant, as the spirits began to dissipate, their forms melting away into the light, their whispers fading into silence. The group, exhausted but elated, watched as the last of the light dimmed and the chamber settled into quiet darkness. They had done it, they had freed the spirits and potentially cleansed Marwood Heights of its haunting. But as they made their way out of the basement, they realized that the true extent of their actions was yet unknown. The building was eerily silent, the oppressive atmosphere replaced by a tentative calm. But as they stepped outside, they noticed something unsettling. The night sky still held a residual crimson hue, and the air carried a static charge that made their skin tingle. In the days that followed, Marwood Heights seemed transformed. The residents who chose to stay reported a sense of peace they hadn't felt in years. However, strange occurrences still happened, albeit less frequently and less violently. It was as if the building was settling, adjusting to its new reality. Elise continued to document everything, her blog becoming a record of their extraordinary experience. But deep down, she knew that the story of Marwood Heights was not yet complete. There were still unanswered questions, shadows in the corners that seemed to watch and wait. As the group gathered one evening to discuss their next steps, they realized that their journey into the supernatural was far from over. They had opened a door they could not easily close, and the boundaries they had crossed whispered of deeper mysteries and darker realms yet to be explored. The artifact, though it had served its purpose, still held secrets, its origins and full capabilities unknown. Cassandra, with her knowledge of arcane architecture, suspected that the artifact was only a key to larger, more potent forces that could exist beyond the veil of their reality. The night air was tense as they gathered in Elisa's apartment, the walls now stripped of their haunted history but lined with new maps and notes, plotting their next foray into the unknown. As they discussed their plans, a sudden chill swept through the room, a reminder that while they had changed Marwood Heights, they had also changed themselves, becoming beacons for supernatural forces. Jonah, his voice grave, pointed out that they had meddled with powers that humans were not meant to control. Maya, her recent drawings darker and more complex, shared visions of other places, other keys like the artifact, scattered across the globe, each associated with its own legion of spirits and stories. Alex, now a firm believer in the supernatural, suggested they prepare for whatever might come next, proposing they study more about spiritual protection and containment. The group agreed that they needed to learn more about the forces they had unleashed. Cassandra brought out the ancient blueprints once more, tracing lines that formed patterns and symbols they hadn't noticed before. These symbols matched some of the engravings on the artifact, suggesting that there were more connections to be made, more secrets to uncover. As the night deepened, the wind outside grew stronger, the windows rattling as if in warning. Elise felt a familiar prickle at the back of her neck, the sensation of being watched. She glanced around, half expecting to see Sarah's spectral form in the shadows, but there was nothing, only the feeling that something unseen lingered just out of sight. Determined to protect themselves and uncover the truth, the group formed a plan to travel, to follow the map Cassandra had pieced together from the old blueprints and the symbols on the artifact. Each location promised answers but also hinted at dangers far greater than any they had faced at Marwood Heights. As they made preparations, Elise continued to document their experiences. Her blog posts were now followed by thousands, her readers drawn into the mystery and horror of their journey. She wrote not just to share their story but to warn others of the thinning veils between worlds, the shadows that moved when thought unwatched, and the doors that could be opened but might never be closed. The final night before their departure, the group met once more in the basement of Marwood Heights, the site of their most harrowing and transformative experience. They set up a circle of protection, a simple ritual to safeguard their journey. But as they chanted together, the air around them grew oppressive, the shadows deepening. Suddenly, the candles flickered out, one by one, as a deep, resonant hum filled the room. The ground trembled, and a fissure cracked open in the floor of the basement, a stark, gaping wound in the earth. From the fissure, a bluish light glowed, casting an otherworldly illumination. The air pulsed with power, and a voice, ancient and indescribable, echoed through the chamber. Its words felt more than heard. "You have opened the gate. Walk now the paths of shadow, but beware the depths of the beyond." The group stood frozen, the magnitude of their undertaking settling in. They were no longer merely investigators of a haunted apartment complex. They had become participants in a cosmic play, a battle of forces beyond their understanding. As they left the basement, stepping out into the cool, early morning air, the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. But the horizon was not clear. It was streaked with crimson, the color of blood, of a warning. Elise looked back at Marwood Heights, its structure silent and imposing against the waking sky. She knew they were leaving much behind, but they were also moving towards something unimaginable. The story of Marwood Heights was just one chapter in a much larger saga, a narrative threaded through the very fabric of reality. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but it held the promise of truths too compelling to ignore. And so, with the weight of their past experiences anchoring them and the thrill of unknown adventures calling them forward, Elise and her friends stepped into the burgeoning daylight, their futures intertwined with the shadows they sought to understand, the boundaries of their world forever blurred. The end was not an end, but a beginning, a doorway to the infinite and the unknown.